Welcome back. Welcome back to the program, Let It Out, that you're listening to right now. My name is Katie Dalebout, and welcome back to today's guest, Madelynn De La Rosa. Maddie is returning to the podcast after years in the making. If you don't know Maddie, you should, you will in the next 2 hours. I'm actually going to break this up over a couple episodes, but she was last on the show in 2020, I believe. We were definitely talking about how pandemic heavy that time was, and we recorded it in person, and I believe it was the first one I had recorded in person since pre-pandemic, and that felt like a big deal. So in that episode, we go over, her origin story and how she ended up making films and getting into ceramics and how she grew up and lived in so many different places. And in this one, we centered the conversation really around the last year and how she experienced so much change. She really reinvented herself and she went inwards and she learned a lot in the last year. And we really unpack that. And another thing that happened, I guess, really largely, I would say in the last year, although we've known each other for the last several, is, Maddie's like one of my best friends now. So since that first conversation, we've gotten a lot closer, which I think makes this conversation much different than the last one you may have heard. And maybe you're new here. Maybe you're new to me or you're new to Maddie, but welcome. Here we go. We recorded this just before the holidays. She spoke about how she's actually one of those rare people who sticks to their New Year's resolutions. And she's actually made some massive shifts in her life that have begun as resolutions. So like I said, I'm going to break this into 2 parts, but here in part 1, we talk about spirituality, shadow work, learning to be gentler on yourself, the gene keys. We talk about Abraham Hicks. We talk about following the flow. If you don't know what any of those things are, we kind of explain it and well, you'll figure it out. We talk about not being too dogmatic about routines. Maddie really helps me with something with that. And then I'll let you know what we talk about in part 2 at the end, but stick around. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you had a lovely holiday season. I hope you got to slow down or speed up socially or somewhere in between. And I am optimistic for this year. I really am. Yeah, I am. And I hope you are too. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm years in the making.
Are you recording?
We're recording. This is it. We're doing it. We started... Well, we can't exactly remember what last time you were on the podcast. It was several years ago, and pretty much ever since, we've been wanting to do this again.
Yeah, we've been talking about it for a really long time.
But really, in the last year, because we did a live YouTube last Halloween. Remember that?
Yeah, it was a disaster.
I had a nice time, though.
It was really fun. It was just my first time doing a live stream, and that was a whole other thing. But we did it.
We did it. I have no recollection of what we talked about.
It was a blur.
But people asked us questions. Oh, which I put on my Instagram for people to submit questions. So we'll do that at the end and see what we got.
Yeah, great.
But I have a bunch myself.
Okay, I can't wait.
So what has happened, the big thing that happened between the last time you did the podcast and today is that you and I became really close friends.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun.
And I think that will make this conversation really different than the last one because I'm not getting to know you
right
and talking about how you became who you were then.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think what's cool about doing this is that it's a time capsule of today.
Right.
2023, end of the year, about to be a new year. And we just went on a walk before this with Violet and had a pre-show where we were sort of talking about our years and in a way that we were along for the ride and we were in each other's lives during it, obviously, but looking at it more holistically and looking into the next year. And I think this conversation will sort of be a recorded version of that as well.
Yes.
Because I told you this as we were walking. So I meet up with Maddie on the street and she had to go to the post office and I'm like, oh, I'll just walk down to where you and Violet are. And I'm holding my phone watching a video of hers.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to finish it because I usually watch all of Maddie's videos and I watched all the vlogs, but I got really behind this year. And so I watched all of them today for the entire year.
It's pretty impressive, honestly.
I think I missed that. I just didn't finish that one, but it was really, really cool because I'm in a bunch of them.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I haven't even looked back either, so you probably know more than me.
I'm getting a tattoo in one of them. That was a recent one.
Right, yeah.
And then when we went to see Barbie.
Right, yeah, you were in that one.
And I feel like I'm about to be in the Valentine's Day one because we were together and I can just feel I'm about to be in that
you're just going to pop up. Yeah, I know.
And I was at a lot of the places that even if I don't make an appearance, like your show. And anyway, it was a big year for you.
Yeah.
And next year's going to be a big year too. And anyway, I'm just really grateful that you're here. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Again.
What do you remember from the last time you were here? What was that like? Was that your first podcast that you'd done?
No. But it was my first one that felt like really cozy with a friend. And I just remember us having a really fun time together. And it felt so easy. We were talking about how we hadn't listened back to that episode. So I have no idea what we talked about.
I know.
But it was great.
Yeah, now I am kind of curious, but I'd also just like
I know. I don't know that I want to listen to it either.
And it will just anytime you look at and revisit anything from what you did before, it's uncomfortable because we change, obviously. Like it would be worse if we didn't change because that would just mean we remained stagnant. So that's good in a way.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that will be uncomfortable about that for me is that and I wonder if you'll feel this way too, but it's always a bit like when I'm closer with someone in retro, like I'm closer than we were then.
Right.
We're going to be different with each other and it's going to be uncomfortable to hear. You know what I mean?
I know.
That's the main thing. Who knows if maybe things we said will also be uncomfortable, but we'll never know. That's the thing about us having our work out. Like, okay, well, we're going to get into all of it. So in my deep dive into my friend's YouTube today, and also I just read all of your Substacks, which I'm so glad you have a Substack, which everyone should subscribe to immediately. Pause if you are not already. But in doing so today, you are someone who actually, I learned, I didn't know this before today, but you are someone who actually sticks to New Year's resolutions, which I thought was not only a really timely place to start, but a good one because you began this year in terms of shifting your creative work and spiritually and with meditation and beyond, it all sort of stemmed from early in the year, like around a New Year's resolution, right? Is that right?
It did, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So for a few years in a row, I was doing something new. And I am one of those people who does stick to my New Year's resolutions because I use it as like a catalyst for change and growth. So the New Year is always really exciting for me. And I even use birthdays as like milestones to like set out a new whatever it is that I want to do. But a few years ago, I decided to go vegetarian on my birthday. And in the new year, I decided I was going to go vegan. This was like 8 years ago. And then before that, I, cut out fast fashion. In the new year, it was like, that was like 7 years ago or 8 years ago. So yeah, I've got a good track record, like a decade full of stuff that I've committed to. I just get really excited about having a fresh start. I don't look back as some other people do, but yeah, I really enjoy it.
I think I used to teach this, that hat I wear all the time that says Kripalu, that workshop place. I used to teach a workshop there at the New Year called about resolutions and like changing your relationship to goal setting. And I would always think about how sometimes it is actually good to do the thing you're meant to do when you're meant to do it.
Right.
And capitalizing on the collective momentum of change and growth and excitement and, momentum, which I think is really important to us and all of us. And yeah, so that's really interesting that is something that you have done for years, like for nearly a decade. So how did that pan out specifically this year? What were some of the intentions that you set at the beginning of 2023?
Well, this year I told myself I was going to meditate every day. So in January, I started doing that, and I would pull up a random YouTube video, like a guided meditation, and I would just quiet my mind for like 10 to 15 minutes. And I was actually going through a really tough few years prior. So I guess it was just my way of committing to something new and just seeing what would happen. And a few months later, I had a spiritual awakening. So it freaking worked. I was not expecting that, but holy shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So in one of those videos around that time at the beginning of this year, you talked about meeting up with a friend and she said something helpful.
So I was going through this really tough time where everything was sort of spiraling downwards and I was super anxious. I was worried about money, relationships, friends. I mean, I was just like, I was freaking out. I was in fight or flight for a really long time. And so I met up with one of my friends during this time where I was spiraling. And she was like, well, tell me your old story and then tell me your new story. And I think there was something about saying that out loud. And I don't know what, but I think there was something really powerful in that, like setting that intention. And then we went to a crystal shop afterwards. I don't know if this has anything to do with it either, but I didn't really have any money, but I was like, oh, let me buy like a couple of crystals for myself. Maybe it'll help. Mm-hmm. And I came home later that night and I was sitting at the edge of my bed and I was holding my crystals because I was really excited about them. And my friend had bought me a bunch of stuff too, which was really nice. And a Dr. Joe Dispenza video was playing on my TV. And I heard him say, you are the creator of your own reality. And my whole body lit up. And I just had this huge epiphany. And I was like, oh my God, I can like turn this around. I think I got like 20,000 steps that day just from pacing because I was so anxious.
I mean, I remember, like I was talking to you during this time, which is cool to hear the story, but I remember
really going through it. But I think I was able to have that moment because I was so tired and exhausted from being so anxious all day. And yeah, it like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I felt liberated in that moment.
Yeah, I'm curious, like it's kind of when I used to teach yoga, right? We would talk about how the getting to Shavasana is actually the yoga. Like that's the yoga. You do all the flow and you do all the other things to get your body to a point where you can actually
receive,
tap in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's sort of, what happened to you holistically. And I could be wrong, but I don't know if you even remember this, but early this year, I was walking into the dentist and you called me in the middle of the day. Do you remember this?
I think so.
And I answered and you were crying and you were
I don't remember
really anxious. Or maybe you weren't crying when you answered, but you started to cry. And we talked for a minute. And, I've kind of been in a similar spot in my own way. And you were like, I have to go. I'm going to meet up with a friend.
Oh, was it that day?
I think it might have been.
Okay.
But I don't know. I remember the state that you were in during that. And then after that, we had been talking every day that week, voice texting. And then I just picked up the phone because I knew, like, you don't usually call me. And I just knew I just like intuitively was like, you need to answer the phone right now. And then we kept and then you like sent me a really nice text after, and you were like, I'm really glad you answered right then, because it got like,
Yeah.
you just needed to talk to a friend.
I think I just needed some, like a sounding board or just
Yeah.
something. I just felt so lost.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting is like, I really believe in that quote that says, when you feel helpless, help someone.
Mhm.
Like it really can shift. Nothing gets me out of my own head, like helping someone else if I can. And it helped me to be able to talk to you that day. And then we were really back and forth about just kind of other things in our lives. And then suddenly, like one day, we sort of shifted into talking about these things, which I had been aware of and doing for a long time, but kind of had let go of in some way. And so it was sort of a tune-up, and it became these really gratifying conversations that we had that really I appreciated a lot and really deepened our friendship. But you talk about how, you know, that day when you realize that we are the creators of our own reality and you are responsible for your internal state. And you get into quantum physics and Abraham Hicks and like so many things that I love and have found incredibly useful over the years. Like, where were you spiritually before this? Like, was this I know it was a big shift from where you were emotionally, but like, what kind of baggage did you have coming in to like get yourself to be open to this?
That's a good question. I didn't grow up religious, and I think I'd gone to church maybe like once or twice, and it always kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. But spiritually, like in college, I took meditation and yoga, and I had this like chakras book that I bought when I was like 19. I have a tattoo that means faith. I got when I was 16, not even knowing that any of this, like I didn't know. I know, it's so crazy. Like all of the pieces sort of
foreshadowing
have come together. But so yeah, I wasn't exposed to any sort of religious concepts. I didn't know what I really believed in. I believed in the universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, after that happened, I obviously went down the rabbit hole and I started learning all this stuff.
It's probably good because I think you didn't have a lot of programming or baggage or things to sort of undo or redo from a past belief system that you grew up with. And so it probably made you more open this year, which is really interesting. And I think, yeah, I'm just so happy that happened for you and that it really did shift something. So, and I've seen it, you know, as your friend, our conversations of your life, how things have unfolded from like a before after perspective.
Yeah.
So let's like talk about it a little bit in terms of, you see that statement, we're the creators of our own reality. You now have this responsibility towards your internal state. You're meditating every day. I'd love to go through a couple areas of your life and how it has impacted you and how does that sound?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about it creatively. Like, how has your deepening understanding of these spiritual concepts that have been so useful to you, how has it affected you creatively?
Well, it's all I want to talk about. And so I guess but there are so many different ways to say something. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to talk about what I want to talk about in a way that's like really light and fun, because this should be light and fun. You know, it's like law of attraction and all this stuff, which you and we love talking about. And yeah, thinking on like a bigger scale, like of course there are other things happening in the universe and all this, we have like past lives. Like I guess having this thing happen to me in March, it just opened up a whole new world for me. And I think I'm still trying to figure out how to intertwine that in my work. without it being too overtly just like, blah, this is, you know what I mean?
Right. You want it to feel like you.
Yeah. So I'm still trying to figure out how to weave that part of myself in, because I also want to help other people realize that there are other things going on. And yeah, I guess I'm still figuring it out.
When did you decide that you were ready to share about it publicly? Because we're talking about it now, but this is not the first time. You have a video on on YouTube where you talked about it really, really well and really succinctly. Yeah, it was interesting for me to watch that today because I'd been wanting to watch it forever, and I just was sort of waiting, and having witnessed you, like I obviously it wasn't like new information to me, but the way that you articulated it was perfect. It was very simple because I think that's what that needed to be. Right. And you can expand on it later, but you said exactly what you needed to say, you know?
Yeah, I think I actually rewatched it recently and I was like, oh yeah, this is everything I needed to say. Totally. But I was nervous to make that video. Yeah. I was nervous because I didn't know what people were going to think. I didn't know if they were going to think I'd like lost my mind. I don't know. I thought I was going to be judged or like.
And some people might, and some people did, and some people didn't. Like, who knows? But the reaction, from my perspective, looked like it was great.
Yeah, and I think most of my audience is women, so I feel like we're on the same page about like a lot of things, which is nice. So yeah, I think a lot of people were interested, and they were also sort of on that journey too. So it was nice to have that community when I did post about it. But yeah, I was nervous.
When did you know that you were ready to share that? Because it was several months after you.
Yeah. Well, I knew that something big had happened to me and that it sort of changed the trajectory of what was going on in my life. And so I knew I was going to have to say something at some point. And I was like, well, let's just see what happens.
Rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
So what did you feel like once you shared that? Was it, I mean, you mentioned the community and that it felt good to connect with people, but how did you feel? Like, did it feel like a release of sorts?
After that, then I was like, well, damn, what is my content now? You know, I didn't know what it was going to be. And I'm still playing around with it too, which has been fun, but yeah.
Staying where we are for a moment around content and around output and creative work and how to incorporate who you are today into making work that you share with the world that feels like you and feels palatable at the same time, and towing that line. And at the beginning of the year, I wrote this down, and we spoke about it a little bit in the pre-show walk. Reinvention. You know, you spoke about this in that maybe your first video of the year about having this channel, your YouTube channel, since you were 19 years old, and wrestling with how to reinvent yourself within that space, within YouTube. And watching it today made me feel quite emotional, to be honest, and inspired, because I think I was telling you this earlier, but it mirrors my life a little bit with what I'm doing here. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that and how, you know, looking back now, how does that feel like being a year out from it? So first, can you talk about it and like what you were saying in that video then, if you remember?
Yeah. Well, I was talking about co-creating with the universe, which is still true. I'm still learning how to do that. But yeah, I think I've just learned to be easier on myself. I think I was putting a lot of pressure on what I was making. Trying to keep up with the algorithm was a theme that I was struggling with too, which is really silly because I don't think I've ever cared about the algorithm. But I was just at such a low point that it was like all of these things were just like not clicking for me.
So you were sort of like, how do I reinvent myself within YouTube and within making videos and this new way of being? Because I was that first video of the year before the spiritual awakening. That was separate. Right. That was more just you being like, and we were kind of talking about this on the walk, because I really relate to this, right? Like I've been doing this podcast it was 10 years this year, and I can't do it how I did it when I began.
Right.
nor do I want to. And like everything we were saying about even our conversation from 3 years ago, like we cringe at old versions of ourselves because that's growth, that's change, that's how this works. However, you and I have both gained our experience in this a medium that we want to continue in. But like for myself, and I think this was similar for you, I had pulled back from it because, and I wrote this down too. You said somewhere in that video, you said, I devalued myself and thought that nobody cares. And you were talking about being in a weird headspace and that you were putting energy maybe in the wrong places with daily vlogs, and you wanted to shift that. So you came up with this new series, the Monthly Digest, which I think is really, really great and ended up now becoming a real tenet of your Substack, which is new. But you were really reinventing the way you were doing YouTube at that time. And I think for the better, and it only expanded to become more correct and more like you. But I think the seed was planted even then, even before you really knew what was going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, I mean, it had always been on my mind because I feel like I had been making some of the same content for a really long time and just not really, like I was sort of making the same stuff year after year. And I didn't know how to get out of that box, really.
Yeah.
And so these Monthly Digest videos, I was like, well, I can make these once a month. It's something to look forward to, and it could be like a mismatch of stuff, which I figured would be easier for myself. And then I had my spiritual awakening, and then I went down the rabbit hole. So it ended up being like a quarterly digest. I only made 4 this year, but it was still me pushing and trying to figure out how I could do this in a different way.
Yeah, I found it really inspiring because, and correct me if this is wrong, but from my perspective, you were doing this for yourself. You were doing something that felt fun for you. You were collecting what inspired you that month. You were collecting what you found interesting. And you were considering the audience in the sense of you were excited to share things that excited you with them, but you were not considering the audience first and figuring out what they would want. You were considering yourself first. And that to me across the board is always makes for the best art and content and whatever you want to call it, because like there's that Bowie quote I quote all the time on this podcast. It could be like a drinking game, but he says like the work always suffered when he was second guessing the audience, and when he was most selfish about it, that's when he made his best work.
Right.
And I was listening to this. I've been listening to a lot of Blonde Shell. Do you ever listen to her?
No.
I love her songs and her lyrics, and this album that came out this year. I was listening to an interview, and she was saying that she wrote it during the pandemic, and she had been making a bunch of different music projects for years and years, and like putting out music, and nothing was really working. And so in the pandemic, she was just like, I'm going to make something for me. I'm just going to make this album for myself, and I'm going to do exactly how I want to do it. And it's going to be super specific and raw and intense. And that's what she made. And of course, that is, to prove the Bowie point, that same thing happened where she was selfish about it. And when we're all not that different, right? Like the human experience is not that different. So instead of trying to do something that we hope people will like, do the thing that you really like, and the people who are meant to see that will come. And I think that's really what you've done your entire career. But I think you needed a reinvention because, and similarly, like I think when I'm trying to, yours is so much more public in some ways, but like when I interview somebody who like, it doesn't matter the audience, it doesn't matter like if I'm excited to interview them and that can be felt, right? Or like if you're excited about a video, that can be felt.
Totally.
Anytime there's a force. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like you can totally tell if someone is having fun or enjoying themselves or playing around and trying something new. And I always knew that too. And I was like, well, I have to keep up with this. And so I sometimes I would just scramble to make something. So yeah, it's really funny because yeah, we do have so many parallels. Yeah, and I think every creative goes through these things.
This reinvention thing's really interesting to me because it's like publicly molting, you know, like how animals go into hibernation or like they shed their skin, right? And it's like a really uncomfortable process and they're, you know, it's sort of like a fever dream of, and then they come out and they're like new. I feel like you had some molting to do. Like
Yeah.
you had to go and same. And like that's like what I've been trying to do. And like when I went away to Montreal, I was hoping to like do that privately. Like, let me go away and come back. And then what I really realized this year, and I'm curious if you agree with this and maybe you don't, but I think the toughness of the years prior and like what we were really coming into this with of like you were saying, being in fight and flight and being in that sort of that state that is just really intense is like molting publicly. Like we need to sort of be going into ourselves and figuring things out, but also like we both, and you much more than I, but like you have this career that you've built for yourself that's like pretty public.
Right.
And so to do that consistently while also figuring out what was going on with you had this like incoherence of like feeling bummed that you're not making your work and putting it out there, and also like feeling like not aligned with the work that you're just like putting out there to feed the algorithm and put out there.
Right. Yeah.
So it was like made this positive feedback loop, but you didn't really want to take the time to go fully in. So it's just, I don't know. And similarly, like sometimes I'm like, do I need to be a phoenix rising from the ashes? Do I need to like fully fall and like fully really crash and like fully hit bottom and then to rise? Or because for me, like that's never been the case. Like I've always had a pretty high bottom. It's like I'll come down, but I'm not going to like, I still am like going to the party and I'm still waking up in the morning. I'm even when I'm down, but then can you really reinvent yourself from that space? Do you have to tear it all down and restart? Or can we do what it looks to me like you did this year, which was like, what do I have to work with this time? Like, cool. I have these skills to make YouTube videos. I have skills to make films. I have skills to make ceramics. Like I have all these different creative projects already going. How can I learn about myself and then come into it with new energy? And that's what it looks like to me that you've done. And you're only going to continue to do that next year. Is that what it's felt like?
It definitely feels like I'm having a rebirth of sorts. Like I'm figuring out who I am, who I really am.
Yeah.
Because I think, the persona that I have put online is me, of course, but there are just like deeper parts of myself. And so, yeah, figuring out how to intertwine that in my art, I think is going to be really fun. And this is the journey of self-love. I've learned how to not place blame outside of myself. I was doing a lot of that. I was sort of pointing the finger and thinking everything else was wrong. And it wasn't until I started working on myself internally and doing shadow work and all that I realized it's all just me. It's all my perception and me projecting. So yeah, I definitely went inwards this year to do all that internal work.
And that's intense.
Yeah.
Shadow work is intense. And I mean, I'm honestly so inspired by you and so happy that this happened for you this year. And I think that, in my perspective, like a lot of this conceptually, I've known about a lot of these things for a long time, but I've had a very intellectual understanding of it, but embodying it is different.
It is so scary.
Yeah.
It is like really, it's like and I also think I had an ego death with my partner shortly after the awakening that I had. So that was like a whole thing where I felt like my world was flipped upside down for a minute.
Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. So I'd gone over to my boyfriend's house and I was feeling kind of off all day. I was feeling kind of weird. Like, and that whole day I called it my backwards day because I had like taken a bath in the morning. I had like burned my food. When was
this again?
This was right after March. This was like this must have been a week or two after my spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
And
this is after your show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was in February. Yeah. So I just had this really backwards day and I was feeling so off, because I'd been on a roll. I'd been like learning about all this stuff. And then I couldn't seem to like scratch that itch. I was just feeling wired and didn't know what to do with that energy. And I went over to my boyfriend's place and we were just going to watch a movie, and he felt something. I mean, he knows me so well. He felt like something was off, and I was like, I don't think you're going to like me after this, because I knew like a big shift was happening, but I didn't know what was happening. And I just cried, like this like crazy cry that I don't know that I've ever really cried. And he held me, and we went into his place, and I just felt like I was going to have a panic attack. I was so confused. It was like everything that I'd been learning up until that point, like all that Dr. Joe Dispenza stuff, it wasn't making any sense to me in that moment. And I was like, oh my God, it just felt like everything had flipped. It was really so bizarre. And I tried to pull up a video, and I'm like, maybe it'll like ring a bell or something. Nothing is making any sense. And it was so crazy. And I was freaking out. So he comes over and he sits with me, and I was like, just remind me that everything's gonna be okay. And he did. And I was fine. But we ended up talking till like 5 o'clock in the morning, because I feel like I'm more left brained. So intellectually, I was taking all this stuff in. But he is more spiritual. And so we were like connecting the dots, and we just had this like really beautiful moment where I was like, oh my God, this is what love is. Like we were so present with each other, and we were connecting the dots, and it just felt like I was experiencing it from like a different perspective, like an out of body perspective. And it was just crazy. And I was like, this is what two people being in love feels like. It's like what God is. That's how I interpreted that.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I had a crazy ego death then. And since then, I've just been actively, when something bubbles up, I know that it's like my inner child, and actively like putting out the fire before it turns into something. Because I used to be pretty reactive, especially in my relationships. And so this is part of the work.
Why do you call it an ego death?
Well, that cry I had in the parking lot was so intense. I don't think I've ever really experienced anything like that, but I think I was just shedding a bunch of stuff that I had like wound up, and yeah.
Wow. I'm really happy that happened for you. It's beautiful. Like that's beautiful that you were able to experience that and not, dance around the perimeter of it, but like dive into it,
It was, I like fully surrendered. And,
right.
and I, in previous relationships, I don't think I'd ever been able to do that. And I was super reactive. I would break it off with people all the time. I was just sort of all over the place. I just, I was on my like powerful woman shit, yeah, totally.
Which is good. Like that's still in you. And that was like absolutely. A chapter of your life. I mean, we joke like in our friend group that's very much still in you in the way that you give advice, I think, to your friends, right?
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I just like surrendered in a way that I hadn't done with another human before, ever. And so it felt like really intense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm feeling like a contactness of it right now. So that happens, and sort of what happens next. Let's just sort of go through it chronologically. So you have that big moment, you surrender, and then, that was only halfway through the year, or not even like a quarter through the year. So what are some of the other beats that sort of lead up to where you are now?
Well, those were like the two big ones.
Yeah.
And since then it's just been like slowly unraveling and still continuing to learn all this stuff. Well, okay, this year I've been on a weed journey. I freaking love weed. And I started smoking weed in like 2020 because I was dating someone and we smoked a lot of weed, which was fun. And then it turned into how I could like, it also allowed me to let go because I was totally in my head. And whenever I would smoke, I would just be like, woo, I could finally like release and let go. And after I had my spiritual awakening, I would smoke weed and then just also go down the rabbit hole, which was awesome. And but I think I'm getting to the point where it's like I'm trying to release all of these attachments, right? And all of these like identities. And so yeah, I think I'm like slowly letting go of weed a little bit. But yeah, that's been another thing this year. And you realize that like that guilt, it's passed down through your DNA. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like going through the crevices of how like the inner workings of my brain and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting to not have to put the pressure on anything because whatever we worship whatever we need, right? Like weed becomes what you worship, or a person becomes what you worship, or in releasing all those attachments is like really hard, but really more sustainable to whatever comes next,
Yeah, exactly. And I've been doing a lot of karma yoga, which is basically you're just super present during everything that you do, whether it's washing the dishes, going on a walk, you're just like super aware. Yeah. So a lot of that too.
Wow.
Yeah.
You talk about heart-brain coherence. Can you talk about what that is a little bit? Because to me, I think about it with whenever I get overwhelmed or I can tell that I'm about to, I got this really great advice this year that someone close to me pointed out. When I can just get calm, if I can just get myself calm, I can kind of figure out everything. I don't need anybody's advice. I don't need help even. Mm-hmm. I can do it. Getting myself calm, I might need help with that. I might need a friend for that. I might need myself for that. I might need a tool or whatever. And to me, that sort of relates to the heart-brain coherence piece. And I'd love if you could talk about that, or if you relate to that.
Yeah. Well, I was super in my head. And I think most people are just totally consumed by our thoughts. And so the meditation helps break that up. And you can't exist without being in your head and having those thoughts. Eckhart Tolle talks about it a lot. But basically, when you're able to get out of your head and turn inwards, you're able to think, well, like you're saying, you're able to think more clearly. To me, it just means letting go of your thinking mind and tapping into your like inner space.
Right. So that's what I'm doing when I'm getting calm. That was her way of articulating exactly what you said.
Yeah, you just notice what's going on the inside.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do that when you're in fight or flight, or when you're just going, which I have a tendency to do. So it's like just knowing my limits has been quite helpful for me this year, instead of
pushing through.
Yeah. Exactly. And just knowing, I mean, really this comes down to energy management. Mm-hmm. Like I know that if I have multiple things in a day, that's not great for me. I know that if I have multiple things, if I have something every single night of the week, I like to have a night in between where I can just, it doesn't mean I don't do anything, but it just means I don't have a plan. Mm-hmm. So like I can call a friend and like make a plan if I want to, or I can be home alone. But I went, and this is something I think you know about me, but I just went at a pace of like, I pick up people very quickly. I make friends very easily, which is great. But then it becomes a way of like, it becomes a distraction from myself and my work and my creatively and spiritually, and sometimes it can be so intense to dive into something. So I want to,
Yeah, you're creating like a space, like a little gap for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You also say something, and it's something that we talk about a lot, but easy is correct. Can you talk about that? Like easy is right.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so if any of you guys know about the gene keys, that was definitely an early deep dive that helped me on my journey.
Can you talk about it a little?
Yeah, so Richard Rudd is the guy who did this, and I think he came out with this over a decade ago, but you put in your birthday, so it's like astrology, and you get basically it's like a map of your wounding. So it takes your birth date, place, and time you were born, and it shows you like your life's purpose, your work stuff. And when you start diving deep in there, one of the things he mentions is easy is right, because my life's purpose, if you guys are familiar with Gene Keys, is Gene Key 23, which is simplicity. And that's where that comes from. It's like once you start realizing these things, you start making your life more simple.
I want to pull mine up at dinner after this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So go on. How did that, once you found that as your purpose, how did you shift? Like, how did you shift things, in the material plane to support
externally?
That? Yeah.
Well, I went inwards this year. So I wasn't really seeing people. I stopped drinking. I wasn't making plans. I was just sort of really taking time for myself to slow down because I was so wound up for so long. So yeah, if there's something that I'm not really into or don't really want to do, I'm not going to do it. I'm trying really hard to make it super easy on myself.
Yeah. Following the flow.
Yep.
I've done that too. I feel like that's something that I've just become much more clear.
Yeah, good. Because Abraham Hicks talks about this. Mm-hmm. She talks about the pushing against. Mm-hmm. When you start feeling that knot in your stomach or something feels off, that's the pushing against. And it's your body trying to tell you that, no, like you need to think about something else or do something else, or you know what I mean?
That's always been one of my favorite Abraham bits.
Yeah.
About how going with the momentum instead of trying to focus on what is working and not trying to force. Mm-hmm. And so much of life is timing, which is what I've realized. And I was kind of trying to say that to you earlier today when we were talking about like, wow, this is definitely the day we were meant to do this, because there's a level of trust that one has to have to embody that part of Abraham. And that's something that I have so much I need to work on still, and as we all do. But one thing that I'm proud of myself from this year is that I have been more discerning on, she says this, using your feelings as your road signs, mm-hmm. of like trying to not push against having what I was going to say about a level of trust of like, what I used to do was like, well, if I don't do it now, if I don't keep it warm, it might never happen. It might never, if I don't because, and sometimes that you have to have a letting go of that. Like I had this meeting yesterday morning that I texted them and was like, I'm not going to, can we reschedule because I'm going to Ojai for the night and I can't do it. And they said it was fine, but they didn't give me a new time. And my brain started to go into like, well, now it'll never happen. And you shouldn't have gone to Ojai. You should have just kept the plan because now it'll never happen. And it's like, or I could take the belief of like, it wasn't meant to happen that day and it'll happen at a better time. But there's a level of confidence that you need to have that. There's a level of self-trust and reliance.
Yeah.
So has that always been something that you've had, or is that something you've had to develop?
No.
Do you have any advice?
I am working on that.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's the letting go part.
Yeah.
Still. And remembering that we are nature too. We are a part of nature. And we also have our seasons. And like, I think we're so used to just fighting it and trying to just keep going. So it's finding that flow and that balance with nature. because everything is always changing.
Yeah.
And not getting caught up in the chaos.
Right. I think cyclical, like thinking about the cycles and the seasons is really important. And I guess where we live, the seasons are hard to remember.
Pinpoint, yeah.
hard to pinpoint, exactly. But that is a really good, something that I just find so incredibly comforting is like thinking about the tides when I think about my emotions, because dark before dawn. I mean, I guess the biggest cyclical reflection of our internal state is our periods, which we talk about a lot in like our friendship. But it is true of like, that's intense. Like it's intense, the emotional dips that come with that. And also I'm kind of grateful. I've kind of like relished in it this year of like,
yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Like I know it's going to come and I know to sort of capitalize on when it's not. And sometimes external things fall in a time when I wish they weren't. And that's frustrating, but that's like the capitalistic world that we live in, and it just is what it is. But if I can finagle things to be coherent with my cycle, like that's excellent. And with us being nature, I think the more we can think about it that way, the more we can, it helps with that trust bit, because you trust that when the leaves fall in the fall, they're going to come back in the summer. And
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like funny when you like expand outwards your like mind, when you can, you're not just thinking about yourself and your situation. Like we're on a planet that's spinning in like the right degree to where we're able to sustain life here. We don't have to think about breathing. And once you can remember that, you're like, oh my God, we are so held by the universe. And animals and trees, I mean, they're just doing their thing. They're just, they're not thinking about what they're doing.
Right.
And so it's a good reminder. And also our periods are, in tune with the cycles of the moon too. So it's so fascinating.
And the tides.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think about it. Bodies are such a great example of this. Like, sure, animals and nature and outside, but like the body you got like right now. You know what I mean? Like it's right here. And I always think about this of like, isn't it, if we really, this gets me into it quite quickly. Like you get a cut, you had to get stitches this year. Like our bodies literally grow back together. You can, I mean, there's these things that like I have gotten hurt and I have felt better. And the older we get, the bigger sample size we have of that happening emotionally, physically.
Yeah. It's getting in touch with your body.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody, my friend Alyssa, who's done this podcast before, she has this project called Our Nature. And for Earth Day, a couple of years ago, she had us all submit like, what is nature to you? And I said, I didn't really feel that all that connected to nature. This was like 3 years ago. And it was when I had just gotten here, but like technically I still lived in New York. And my relationship with nature was sort of like unclear. And so I answered the question a way that I'm grateful that like it still holds up. But I was just like, to me, nature is people. Like I'm really good at connecting with people in conversation and like that's, but like we're made of the same stuff. Like we are like you're an animal,
Right. Yeah. We are. Yeah. Our bodies are a gift from nature.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that kind of gets me into it a little bit.
Yeah. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. How has all of this impacted your relationships with your friends? You mentioned your boyfriend a little bit, but like how all of your relationships with any sort of level of closeness with people?
Well, they've all gotten better and easier because I'm tuning into them in a way that I don't think I was able to before, because I was so in my head, always thinking about something. And so now you realize that just like being with someone and like opening your heart space is like as a way to connect with somebody is like really special and beautiful and sweet. And so, yeah, it's slowing down and being patient and being with the other person. Yeah. And it's been great.
What would you suggest to someone listening to this episode who's curious to begin in some way with what we're talking about? Incorporate it in their own way. If I was listening to this, which I am, and I have been, like, it would inspire me to be like, okay, well, I want what she's having. Like, where do I begin? Or where do you suggest I look to potentially find my way in that's interesting to me?
Well, I can recommend some stuff that really helped me on my journey. So Gene Keys was a huge one. Abraham Hicks has been huge for me too. And then, yeah, well, I would maybe just probably start with meditating, if I'm being honest. I really do think it starts with slowing down, because that way you can let enlightenment catch up with you. So if this is something you're seeking, I think it really is just about being present.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as that.
Mindfulness.
Yes.
Which, now I am starting to remember some of our first conversation, because I do remember us talking about Tara Brach.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I do remember us talking about, and I will be curious to maybe hear what you said about this, but I at the time, I always asked people what they thought about God, spirituality, what happens when we die. And I definitely asked you that.
You did?
I'm sure. Because it was part, I was asking it I still do. I still ask people that.
That's awesome.
So I'd be curious what you said.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I know. It's interesting. That's neither here nor there. But also to, for people listening who perhaps already meditate or are into this, what would you say about incorporating it and embodying it? And like, I'll speak for myself. For me, I would, and sometimes still do, kind of look at this stuff in a way that I realize is more like spiritual entertainment, you know what I mean? Rather than like making it useful, like watching Abraham Hicks videos on repeat and reading self-help books and listening to podcasts about this stuff and thinking like, cool, yeah, that sounds great. But in practice, not actually incorporating it or not fully embodying it, because it requires a level of surrender. So do you have any advice on that?
Well, I think that's the trick, right?
Okay, that was part 1 of my conversation with my dear friend, Madelynn De La Rosa. I didn't really say this at the top, but if you don't know Maddie, she has an incredible YouTube channel, and we talk about it several times in this, so please subscribe if you are not already. And she now has a Substack, which we touched on maybe that's in part 2. So sign up for that as well. My Substack is called Let It Out List, and it's recommending Maddie's. So you can find it there. It's also linked in the show notes, of course. And you can follow her on social media. Let her know that you listened all the way to the end of part 1. Why don't you send her, what do we think Maddie's favorite emoji is? Some sort of, maybe the pink heart. I think she's given me that one before. So go ahead and send her the pink heart. I'll tell you what, I'll find out what her favorite emoji is. I think she told me last time because I used to do this, but I'll find out and then we'll make that the emoji for next week. Remember I used to do this? We're going back to our roots here. I used to find out who listened all the way to the end by who would text me or comment on my latest Instagram post what the emoji of the week was, and it was fun. And then I stopped doing it because I didn't think it was cool. But you know what? This year, I don't care what's cool anymore. We go towards warmth here on the program and in our lives. Okay, so next week, if you come back on the show, if you want to hear us talking more, I would love to have you. This is what we talk about next time. We get into, listen, you want to come back because as you know on the show, dare I say on all shows, things come alive in Act 2. That's where we get comfortable. That's where we forget we're recording. We're a little looser. The kinks have been worked out. So come back next week for part 2. We talk about handling the little things to be ready for the big things, how overcorrection emotionally can be like a wrecking ball. We talk about not kicking the can down the road with tasks too much, how doing internal work leads to changing your life externally as well. We talk about setting boundaries. We talk about setting intentions and taking actions to support them, how people are afraid to be ordinary. We think people are afraid to be vulnerable, but really it's people are afraid to be ordinary. We talk about trying to control how we're perceived by others and how that creates separateness. We talk about the difference between intellectual understanding and embodiment. It's a mouthful. It's a lot, right? And then things get a little bit lighter. We talk about the movies that she's watched recently that have inspired her. She gives 2 really great recs. We talk about advice for someone wanting to watch more new films. Me, I was the person who asked and wants that. She gives some advice, and then she tells the story of a time she laughed the hardest recently. It's a very funny story. It has to do with tea. And then I ask a couple questions that were submitted by you. So tune in next week for that. If you want to do a workshop that I made listen, I've been teaching this workshop for 10 years. Can you believe it? It's called Remix Your Resolutions. I used to do it live in person at Kripalu, which was a real dream come true. I started doing it in 2014 at a yoga studio, and then I did it everywhere, stores. I did it in New York City at Cat Beauty in the West Village, which was like a packed house and standing room only, and it was so fun. And then a dream come true, I got invited to teach it annually at Kripalu in Western Massachusetts, and it's a retreat center and a yoga center, and I loved teaching this workshop so much. And of course, in 2020, there was a halt put on that sort of in-person gathering, and so I made it on Zoom and recorded it, and that is available for you to do if you'd like to. It's a way to set intentions for the new year. It's a journaling process that I take you through, and we go into 8 different life areas. And also there's a part about how to incorporate journaling into your life. Did you know I wrote a book about journaling? That's why I teach these workshops about journaling. But yeah, I wrote this book called Let It Out about journaling. It came out many years ago. And yeah, this is one of my favorite parts of that body of work of teaching workshops about writing for emotional wellness, and it's available. So that's that announcement. And then I also want to say too, I am adding 3 more spots to my creative consulting. So if any of the things that we speak about on the show resonate with you and you want to work with me one-on-one, I have 3 spots available, and there's so many new things coming soon for Let It Out. So stick around. I'm so glad you're here. So grateful that you listened. If you find value in this episode, send it to a friend. That helps so much. If you want to rate it on iTunes or wherever you're listening, that would be cool. This podcast has its own Instagram. It's called Let It Out with 3 T's. And my Instagram is just my name. They're both me, actually. Shh. And of course, you know where to find Maddie. I am so grateful to her. I love her. She's incredible. And we will talk to you next week. Okay, bye-bye. This podcast is edited by the incredible, the one and only Brianna Bain, who will also be back on the show very soon.